What's up, guys? You are listening to HVAC Masters of the Hustle podcast, and this is your host, J Dub Moneymaker, and welcome to episode 83, man. First off, I want to say thank you for everyone that reaches out week after week and tells me how this podcast helps you and your company go to the next level. And for all you new listeners out there, make sure you smash the subscribe button. Make sure you guys tell all your friends about this podcast because, like I said, this is bringing thousands and thousands and thousands of people to the next level. And I believe that everyone has a Spartan in them. It's my job, my duty, and my obligation to bring that out in you. And man, do we have a good episode today. Let's go ahead and welcome our guest from the hot seat. You guys ask, you shall receive. Let's welcome Dan Antonelli into the hot seat. How you doing, brother?
What's up, brother? Man, that intro is so much energy. It's awesome. It's like listening to Godsmack or something like that, you know?
Oh yeah. Hey, let's start it off. I gotta say, I've been to a lot of rock concerts in my day. And I gotta say, the best concert I've been to is Godsmack and Metallica. And I gotta say, Godsmack took the stage, man. Their pyro show.
Yeah,
Whoo.
yeah. I mean, every day I get in my car and it automatically picks that, 1,000 horsepower song as the first song to start my day off. And it's really hard to not like just be like so pumped when you get to work after listening to that on the way in. So it's a good start to the day.
Nah, absolutely, brother. So thank you for being the guest in the hot seat. I gotta say, man, on social media, I just keep seeing your logos and your company after company and your name and your name. I mean, your name's getting huge in this industry when it comes to marketing and truck wrapping and all that. So, can you kind of tell my listeners what you do, how you got into the industry of marketing and making, truck wraps and the awesome
Sure.
work that you do out there?
Yeah, absolutely. I run Kick Charge Creative. We're a 20-person branding and marketing agency. So we do everything from logo design and truck wrap design, brochures, websites, SEO, pay-per-click, all that other stuff. But at the heart of what we do, I mean, we're primarily a branding agency. I mean, that's the heart of what we do. And I got my start when I was literally like 15 years old, lettering vans and sign painting. So I was this weird kid in high school that, my friends were going out and partying and I was going home lettering alphabets on the back of a old trunk. And so I was
Okay.
obsessed with lettering. I was obsessed with truck lettering. I got a job in a sign shop when I was 17 and worked under a great sign painter. And I thought that's what I was going to do. I'm like, I want to be a sign painter. That's what I'm going to do. And my parents were like, you really need to go to college. So I went to college and I wound up getting a degree in advertising, which actually really helped me. And then I worked for 5 years as a graphic designer in New York City, but I kind of missed working with small businesses. I missed working on their image, on their brand. And I thought at the time, I said, well, wouldn't it be cool if a small business could go to one company and get all their marketing needs fulfilled? So get their logo, get their
Mhm.
truck done, get their brochures done. And at 97, websites were just starting to come in. So I started doing websites. And I just kind of looked at that philosophy that small businesses deserve just as good of a brand as a big company does. But there wasn't really anyone putting
Yeah.
all those different pieces together. So the small business would go to maybe the sign shop for this, and then like a designer for the other stuff, and all the stuff looked different. Even though it was the same company, everyone had their own twist on it, their own interpretation of it. And I just really believed at the
Oh
time
yeah.
that it was, if everything could be, has such continuity so that no matter where a customer saw an image of that company, that it would look consistent. And that's really the bedrock of what we do is no matter where someone interacts with the brand that we create, we want that image and that perception to be controlled and to deliver that positive brand promise, and make sure every single touch point is delivering that, and coordinating all those aspects. So it's been a crazy ride. I mean, we're at probably over 1,500 brands that we've done in the last 25 years, probably about 400 to 500 HVAC alone we've done. Um,
Yeah.
and then so the truck wraps too, and the wrap design. For me and my perspective, it's the most important implementation of that brand. So making sure you
Yeah.
get that
What
right.
is it that
That
absolutely. What is it that you look for when you're branding a company? Something that you and I talked about when we just started our conversation before we went live was we talked about when a owner brings you their logo, right? And maybe it's been their logo for 10 years or maybe 20 years, right? And you're like, you know what? That's just not going to cut out, right? How do you go about changing someone's logo and kind of coming across to the owner so they're not so offended with something that's been, really with them for a while?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a lot of people that love our wrap design and they see something we've done for someone
Mhm.
else and they're like, oh my God, like it's awesome. Dude, what can you do with my logo? And then they send it to me. And that's when, I have to look and see whether or not I can actually get it to function properly for that medium. And that's really the biggest challenge
Mhm.
is many of the brands aren't or were never really designed to be effective for that medium. And they also don't communicate that positive brand promise. So, you have to have that
Yeah.
conversation and say, listen, if I knew nothing at all about you, right, and I see this van, what's my takeaway? What do I think about your company based on that alone, right? And if it
Mhm.
doesn't hit on all those buttons, if it doesn't deliver positive brand promise, meaning I think something positive about this company just from that impression, right? That's what brand promise is really talking about.
Yeah.
If it's illegible, if it doesn't reproduce well at a distance, if it's using clip art, if the color scheme is not ownable, meaning that there's four other red and blue HVAC companies in my space, and I'm yet another red and blue. Well, that means you can't even own your own brand colors. So those are all the things that I want to see and say, hey, these things are not working, properly for you. Let's revisit
Yeah.
this and let's think about how we can spin this in a much better way. And so sometimes that's the first time someone has even had that conversation with them because let's face it, if you go ask somebody to build a website and you've got like a really bad logo, they usually don't tell you. They're just like, oh, yeah, 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 we'll just take your logo, we'll build you a website. And I'm like the first guy coming
Yeah.
in and saying, hey, before you start doing all these other things, you got to fix that foundation first because if you don't fix the foundation, then none of the other stuff works properly. And absolutely right. Yeah,
Mhm.
they've had the logo for 10 years and it's like a warm blanket to them and they're proud of it. Maybe they designed it. Maybe their nephew designed it or something like that.
Yeah.
And so you have that conversation and I'm respectful of it and I appreciate it because I mean, even from my own perspective, I lived with a company named, we used to be called Graphic Designs. That was the name I started 25 years ago. And 3 years ago, we completely rebranded and changed our name. So we did more than just change our logo. We changed our name too because it didn't reflect who we are today. So that's the other
Mhm.
really good question to ask is, hey, does this brand look and reflect who we are today? It may have been great when you started, but the guys that we're doing work for are the guys that do a great service. They just don't look like they do a great service, right? So we want to match up that image. We want to make sure that we control as much as of that conversation that happens with that consumer before you ring the doorbell, and then you ring the doorbell, and we know you're going to wow them after you ring the doorbell. But I've got to control
Yeah.
everything ahead of that. I got to make them believe that you're the best before you ring the doorbell, and
Oh,
that's really what good
absolutely.
brands should do.
So let's talk about your name and your brand right now. Kick Charge Creative. How'd you come up with that brand? I love it. Let's talk about that.
So, when we were graphic designs, it was graphic D dash signs. And like we did some sign work when I first started, like I mentioned earlier, I did truck lettering and things like that. And I did graphic design work. So I thought it was like, oh, I thought it was really clever, right? But then, you start thinking about it. First of all, it was hard to spell because it had a dash in it, right? And then it was like, well, he's a graphic D dash, like it was just
Uh-huh.
kind of bizarre. And then you sort of get a little bit in that mindset of saying, well, hey, it's been successful for 22 years. Like, why would I change it now? And I got a lot of pushback from family and friends, and they were like, dude, would you change your name? Like, everybody knows you like that. And I'm like, yeah, they do, but it's not who we are today. So when I thought about a name, I said,
Yeah.
well, what's a name that captures our energy and does and says what we do? Like, we energize businesses, we power them, like we bring them to the next level. And graphic
I
design
love
just
that.
wasn't it. And so I had to do that same hard look and say, you know what? I got to change. And when I built this new building 3 years ago, I built it from scratch, and I said, this is the time. This is where I draw the line in the sand, and we're going to move into this new space, and we're going to be kick charge creative at, when we
So
get into
you've
space.
done it to yourself. So the owners listening, even though potentially he's might have done this to you, but he took a look at his own company and said, you know what, this is the time we got to do it. Let's
Yep.
start it. We got the new company, the new building. Let's go. And
Yeah.
I love that. And one thing that we talked about was your branding, right? So when I look at your social media or just a branding, maybe that's not even tied to you, but you guys did the branding, but they didn't tag your name into it.
Hmm.
I know immediately Dan did that logo,
Hmm.
right? So what is it that you do that's so creative? Because you stamp the way that you do your marketing and kind of the way that your logo is. It's kind of like a cartoony, but then you also add a little twist to it. And I
Yeah.
love it. And it's always hidden inside the logo is what the twist.
I think that's the irony sometimes, is that guys want to keep putting more and more stuff into their logo. And I'm trying to
Yeah.
take as much out of it. I'm trying to distill the brand into its purest form. So you see these wraps that have all these crazy things going on, and guys think it's cool. It's like, it's got flames and carbon fiber and shit looks
Too
cool.
much.
And it's just like, no, 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 like, take things out, don't keep adding, distill, like, so simplified. So yeah, listen, we do all kinds of logos. We do mascot, we do non-mascot. Those decisions are really driven by market. So some people are
Hmm.
like, oh, you guys do a lot of mascots, and I'm like, well, I'll do a mascot if it makes sense to do a mascot. It's not like the default solution for everyone. But if I go into market and there's 10 other companies pushing a mascot, I don't want to put a mascot in your
Yeah.
space. Like, I'm not going to do it. So it's really driven by what's happening in that specific market. What do your competitors look like? What do their brands look like? And then what's the right approach? What are we trying to communicate as a company to your consumers? Like, again, that takeaway, right? I hand you a business card and it says, I'll use Victor's example, like Absolute Heating. And what does it say about that company when you hand that business card? What's their takeaway? And if it's not
Hmm.
positive, then you're not doing it right. If it's neutral, you're still not doing it right. And for a lot, it's negative. It's like, oh, he's probably not going to be in business next year, or maybe he won't be in business next year. So you got to remember too, guys are always trying to push the envelope as far as the work and the value that they provide, and the dollars that they can charge. Where they run into
Hmm.
problems is when they don't look like they should be charging what they're asking. So we want to bridge
Exactly.
that, right? We want to make sure that the consumer feels good about spending more money with you, because you've instilled confidence. You've made them feel like this company will be around next year, when if there's an
Absolutely.
issue, or 5 years down the road. Like, I don't want the cheapest guy, because yeah, it's cheap, but like, if something goes wrong, like, do I really think this guy in this like piece of crap van with this crappy lettering is going to be around to fix this next year? Or do I want somebody that looks very polished and very professional? It's like a no-brainer, but that's really the
Absolutely.
way that the consumers think. And listen, do you really want the cheapest guy anyway? Like, that's not who we're trying to sell to. We're trying to sell to
No, no,
people that
absolutely
appreciate the
not.
value of what we provide, and that all stems with the brand. So absolutely, like, take a hard look and you say, is this who we are as a company today? If I'm if
Absolutely.
I'm if I'm a prospective employee and I walk in and I see these vans that look awful, like, am I going to be proud to drive that van? Am I going to be proud to put on a uniform, or to say I work here? And those are all also the intangibles that people don't realize. Is there, everyone complains about recruitment, right? Jason, like all the guys you're talking to, it's like,
Oh yeah.
hey, we can't find anybody to work for it, right? And then you look at their brands and like, well, that's part of the reason. I don't think I want to work there either, because it doesn't look like a
Yeah.
place that I want to work. Like, Ken Goodrich doesn't have the same recruitment problems as other people do, right?
Oh
Like,
no,
why?
absolutely not.
Because he's got a
Great
killer brand.
branding, great culture. Absolutely.
I think his brand, I'm gonna go off topic here, but I think his brand is probably the best large company brand in the country. And it's more than just a polished image, it's a polished message. And you see some
Absolutely.
some some really big companies with some really awful brands, and they keep pouring more and more money into it instead of fixing the root problem. And it's like, well, we're so big, we can't change all our bands. I'm like, well, okay, so then we're going to just keep pouring money into this crap brand and trying to not fix the root of the issue, you know? And the other thing too, Jason, is like, you know, pretty designs, you know, and I appreciate you saying our designs are cool and you like them and you can tell that they're ours, but I'm not driven by that. I'm driven by data, right? So data is really what
Uh-huh.
drives good design. So when we look at data and you know, companies like Service Titan make that so easy to look and see what the
Oh,
CSRs
absolutely.
are logging as lead sources, right? So you know, I can look at a company that had a really bad brand before we fixed it. Like I'll use Gem Plumbing and Heating out in Rhode Island. They're a $100 million company, right? They were getting like 20, I think it was something like 20 something thousand or $26,000 a year of leads attributed to their vans, right? They rebranded,
Yes.
they put 25% of the fleet back on the road, and they got 4 times the amount of revenue off the vans with only 25% of the fleet wrap. So that's a
Right.
16x multiple going across there,
Absolutely.
right? So we know it works when it's done right, you know. And there's other brands that we've rebranded that the old brand wasn't even like awful; it just blended in, right? So those we call blands. They're not brands; they're blands because they
They're
blend
they're
they blend
brands.
in. So we've seen
So
data
let me
with that stuff. It's crazy, you know.
so let me ask you a question, Dan. I'm gonna put you on the spot here. What do you think of my logo and my brand?
For this or
H
for your business?
HVAC HVAC Masters of the Hustle, and right here.
You know, it's all right. There's a couple of things we could tweak on that to tighten it up a little bit. You know,
Okay.
like it's all about the mic and not necessarily as much about the name, right? So that kind of thing would be
Okay.
something to maybe kind of just rethink a little bit or revisit that a little bit. But it's all
Okay.
right.
Well, I'm gonna definitely have conversation with you on this, and we'll
But
definitely talk about this.
but it's got a different use. It's not meant to be going on the side of a truck, you know. So you have
Correct.
a different
Correct.
kind of application. But you know, could it be simplified and tightened? Yeah, maybe. You know, like very simple in terms of how it looks. But yeah, it's all good.
Well, absolutely. Well, again, I'm gonna put you on the spot. I'm gonna ask for your feedback, right? Well, anyways, we talked about also, or actually, I want to talk about before we talk about like ROI and everything with wrapping and marketing. I want to talk about what is the process for a business owner if they came to you and said, I want to go ahead and move forward with doing a logo and a truck wrap and marketing and maybe a website or something. What is kind of your idea of timeline for a business owner?
Well, to start the process, you know, we want to know what is happening in their space. We want to know what their goals are. What are they trying to achieve? You know, are
Hmm.
they, you know, HVAC only now and they're looking to add plumbing in 2 years or something like that, and try to get a sense of where they're going. Definitely want to look at the competitive landscape. We want to look at all the people that they typically go up against when they're bidding a job. What do those brands look like? Are there opportunities there? And that's really where you see huge opportunities because most of the people they're going up against have no idea about why a brand is even important. So that's to me, it's like I
Hmm.
love it. Like I get so pumped when they send me their top 5 competitors and they're like, this guy's 20 million, this guy's 5 million. And I'm like, really? Like, because the stuff looks awful. So I'm like, this is awesome. Like I love it. Right. So looking at those things and then saying, also then talking about the name. So we do so much naming here for HVAC companies. And you got to have that conversation about the name. Like if it's like JHM mechanical, like I got nowhere to go with that. You know, I'm sorry. There's
Yeah.
very little I can
What do
do.
you think when a company has mechanical in it?
It has to go 100%.
It has to go.
Yeah,
Okay.
without question. Unless they're a 100% commercial, then maybe you can keep it. But if you're dealing
Okay.
in residential, Mrs. Jones has no idea what the words mechanical means.
What mechanical? Yep.
You know, so usually we strip that right out and just replace it with, you know, heating, cooling, plumbing, or whatever. You know, so that's again that part of that conversation. But if it's a name that's hard to spell, if it's initial based brands, those are the types of brands that are super hard to gain traction with. They're super hard to make it sticky because if it's JHM mechanical or JHM heating and air, well, you close your eyes and you say that, what image comes to your mind? Well, no image comes to your mind because there's no way to
Hmm.
associate JHM with anything specific unless you keep throwing tons of money at trying to get people to remember why JHM is related to something else, right? So names like Cardinal Heating and Air, right? Much easier because Cardinal, well, where do you go with Cardinal? Well, you have an image related to a cardinal. So the large image of that on the side of the van, the name really simply next to it, and it's Cardinal, Cardinal, Cardinal. Like, so you know the name, right? So you look at names like that. Last name brands are difficult to work with as well. If you've been in the community for a really long time, then that's something you have to consider as well. But if you tell me, Dan, I'm starting an HVAC company next week, there is absolutely no way I'm recommending you name that company after your last name. It makes no sense at
Yeah.
all. But if you've been in the community for 10, 15 years and people know the brand, well, and know your name, that's a different conversation. And we do plenty of last name brands in those situations. But you always want to have
Yeah.
those conversations and just try to figure out, well, what makes the most sense? Because we're going to do this once and we're not going to do this again. We're not going to revisit this,
Yeah.
right? So you make these decisions and you try to see what's really going to work best for them long term. But we really don't even see short term pain from these situations, even on a name change. We really don't see where, oh my God, we had this kind of bump in the road when we rebranded and things slowed down and then it started picking up. I don't really see that because what they had before
Okay.
was really not working well to begin with. And when you roll out a new brand, like we handle the rollouts of a lot of brands, and there's a method to doing it so that you don't lose traction, so that people understand why you've changed the name. Jason Bueller at Bueller Air in Jacksonville, he's a great guy. He would be good to come on the show too. Like we rebranded him and renamed him. He used to be called Air Source America, right? Which sounds like it's
Okay.
not too bad, but people thought maybe he sold oxygen, but his last name was Bueller. Well, who would forget Bueller, right? So that's one where we went the other way. We actually
Bueller.
made the name Bueller Air, and then we worked with him. He's got an awesome tagline: "Stay cooler with Bueller." And when you talk about ROI, and we're going to talk about that, but like Jason has gone from 2.5 million to 4.6 million in 2 years, and has spent the exact same amount of money on advertising. Well, I guess in a percentage wise, it's more money, but he spends less than 4% on advertising, and he continued to spend less than 4% on advertising. So how do you explain that you went from 2.5 to 4.6 in 24 months and changed nothing else about
Change
the way you were
nothing.
doing business? He's like, Dan, I can't go anywhere without somebody saying something about my company. Oh, I've seen your trucks. I see your trucks. And so that's the idea of being sticky in that community. They see those vans. It's got this big head on the side with sunglasses on it. It says Bueller, and everybody remembers it now. But before, he was totally blending in. So like
Yeah.
everything. So now his name, his branded searches online are so much higher because people remember that name. They're not typing in Jacksonville Heating Repair. They're typing in Bueller because they've seen it before.
Yeah.
So top of mind like that is so critical with that name that's sticky that you can remember, and the visuals that go with it too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dan, we just hit a little bit on, ROI and everything like that. When a company, invests in rewraps and marketing, what should they be looking back on their ROI?
So certainly, the easiest thing is call tracking, right? So even if you don't have a dedicated call tracking number, the CSRs, when they get the inbound phone calls, they can log where the lead came from. How did you hear of us? And obviously
Mhm.
truck is one of those things. So that's one that you can definitely judge ROI from. And again, like we see really, really crazy numbers as far as that's concerned. Revenue specifically tied to truck wraps as a lead source. Seatown Electric is another one that has gone from 7 million 2 years ago to they're on pace for 20 million this year. And
Whew.
if you looked at their old brand, you would say it's really not that bad, but it wasn't disruptive, right? It wasn't sticky. There wasn't anything about it that was really, really memorable. And that's another company that had something like, the numbers were again, like it was like a 10x for him, where it was like 23,000 to 230,000
10x.
in terms of number of phone calls attributed directly to the van. So you look at ROI. So you said even if it was $250,000 of revenue tied back to the vehicles, he wrapped about 20 vehicles. So you've got an expense as far as that's concerned, but that expense, those wraps should last 5 years. And these are only people that are saying that they saw the van, right? But the
Yeah.
growth,
Yeah.
people just typing in their name now instead of Googling Seattle heating repair or Seattle electrical repair. So that's where you
Yeah.
say like ROI across the board is affected by the brand. And that you don't need to spend nearly as much money now once people know your name. So it kind of snowballs a little bit because they start seeing these vans. The vans look different than what they're used to seeing because they don't blend in now. And each impression is counting, right? So I always like to say too, like make every impression count, because it's delivering what we want. It's delivering that promise that we're talking about. And the other thing too, like like talking about brand promise, you got to remember also what good brands do is they counteract bias. So every homeowner comes to the table with bias against contractors. Maybe they've had a bad experience. Maybe they've heard so many horror stories about a contractor not doing the right thing, right? So
Yeah.
so they come to the table already somewhat standoffish. They're already afraid. They've got somebody coming to their home. They don't know who they are that's coming to their home. There's an element of trust that has to be established. And that's part of what the good brand is really meant to do is to counteract bias and deliver a positive expectation of the deliverable.
Peace of
So,
mind.
yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
So let me ask you, we're talking about ROI and everything like that, Dan. And I have to ask you, the first time an owner came to you and said, I was at this point after we did our wraps, now we're here, right? We elevated another, extra X, Y, and Z to the company by doing this. Dig in deep real quick. How does that make you feel? I mean, that's a amazing feeling,
Yeah,
right? To
that
know
that's
that you're helping someone.
it's what it's all about. What it's all about. Honestly, I mean, our philosophy here, first of all, is have our clients back at all times, and secondly, I teach to the people here, and I even actually teach wrap design nationally. Like I have a company that I work with where I actually teach wrap design, and one of the important things that
Nice.
I say is design as if lives were at stake, right?
Mhm.
Because if you don't do your job right, that small business that just hired you, maybe they don't do as well. Maybe he can't take a vacation. Maybe he can't hire some people. Look at the brand that we created for Ken at Gettle. Okay, when we created the brand for
Mhm.
Ken, that was a $7 million company. Okay, with about 70 employees. Okay, now they're at what 130, 40 million dollars.
Yeah. Oh, well over
Yeah,
100 million.
with over 500 or 600 employees. So I'm not going to say because of
Oh
my
yeah.
brand that happened, but I know I played a role in that happening. Okay, so I always like to say design like lives are at stake because if you don't do your job well, then that company may not be as successful and really realize their potential. Right? That's the thing that there's so many guys that run great businesses, they just don't look like they run great businesses. So let's fix that. Let's make them look as good as what they do. Like all the people you work with, right? You know what happens with these guys after they ring the doorbell and all the things you're talking about with best practices. Like these
Oh
guys
yeah,
kill it when they
absolutely.
get inside the house. Let's fix
Yep.
all the things before they get to inside the house. And I think that responsibility is huge. And honestly, it's the part that frustrates me sometimes, like even on the HVAC forums that I'm blessed to be on, and I see some of the work that guys are getting done, and I just feel so sad for them. And I know not everyone can use us and everyone can afford us, but I just feel so sad. First of all, that another professional, quote unquote, sold them that idea. And secondly,
Yep.
that they may go ahead and actually do that and then really miss out on the chance to do better for their company. And it's like, I just feel sad, like when I teach wrap design and I'm talking to the designers, I'm like, you guys have an enormous responsibility. Act like it and treat that with the utmost respect because that's someone's money. It's not like a corporation that's hiring you. It's like that's the owner's own money. And you better do the right thing for them. And you better deliver something that will help their business. And if you're not, then you shouldn't be in this business. Honestly, like it frustrates me when I
No,
see,
absolutely.
rap after rap and the stuff is awful.
I see the passion.
You know, sorry.
No, no, I see the passion. I love it. No, you're very passionate about what you do. I mean, you want to help people. And, like you said, not everyone could afford you, right? And when you see them, because they can afford you potentially, they're actually causing more damage by going with another company for me looking from the outside because of what damage that's going to do after years. Because one thing that you just said, Dan, is you should only do this one
Yeah.
time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, it's sad, and I try to offer as much help as I can on those communities, and just try to tell them things to maybe ask the designer to fix or to change. I talk about legibility issues, just basic things like that. But for me, like, the sad thing is that there's somebody out there that's selling them on that. And it's just like super frustrating that, like, no one's really, talking to the customer about legibility, and like, they should know better. Like, the stuff that they present
Hmm.
should be on that level. But the rap industry, the sign industry, just it's just one of those industries that there aren't any governing bodies. There's no criteria to qualification wise to start that kind of company. And
Yeah.
it's like, for me, I'm 25 years or 30 years into this. It's taken me a long time to perfect my craft, right? To get to the point
Oh,
where I am.
absolutely.
But the other thing too, and it's just completely sort of related, but not, but the idea also, and I'm sure you believe in this, is that the idea that nothing you do today is good enough for tomorrow. So that's the other part of what I try to
Oh, yeah.
preach too, is like, you look at the work we do and we win awards, and it's all cool, but you win that award and you're like, all right, that's cool. But you know what?
What's next?
We got to do better tomorrow, so that
Yep.
threshold, that benchmark, that pinnacle, there is no pinnacle, right? You got to just keep going up.
Nope.
Otherwise, at a certain point, you're going down, right? So I refuse to
Yep.
get to the idea that we're on the downslope. I keep going up. But so I just lament that when you see the guys that are putting stuff out there that just aren't reflective of the quality of work that they do. It's sad. It's like, I wish they had the right tools. I wish that they knew the power of what this brand could do for their business, and how it would help on so many levels, not just a cool truck wrap, but how it would make their advertising work better, how recruitment would be easier, and how they get more money for their work is really the other aspect of it, for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Dan,
you,
we
like,
know we talked.
I
No,
was
no,
gonna
go
say,
ahead.
you've been on the other side of this, so you've visited guys that we've branded. Like, you
Yep.
seem to just be going after all our clients, not going after, but you seem to be doing all our clients, which is so cool to see. Like, how does it feel to you on the other side culturally? Because you've seen sort of
You know,
how they feel, like what the vibe is. Like, how does it feel on your side? I'm
so
interviewing you now.
no, it's fine. Going to these companies, having a good brand behind it, right? Like you said, it gives you the stance of being and coming across as professional, right? So not only do you want to come across as a premier HVAC company around your area, right? But you also want the branding and also the professionalism of, the way that you look, your uniforms, your trucks, right? How you present yourself. You have to come across professional. And what I'll say is when I do go to companies that you've logoed and definitely branded them, it makes it a lot easier because your brand comes across that you're professional, right? So, I mean, absolutely. And it's just crazy that all the owners that you've been branding have been reaching out to me. And I would have to say, it feels good that everyone's talking about my training because, when I go to these trainings and on sites and everything, I'm truly there to help people grow to the next level, right? I always talk about that next level mindset, right?
Yeah.
Thinking outside the box as well. So being creative, not being stuck in the mindset that you're stuck at making 14, 15, 16, $20 an hour, right? I've been that warehouse guy. So when I go out there, I really like to educate people the potential. But it's crazy, Dan, just talking a little bit deeper into this. When I went all in on this training, I wasn't anticipating it being to the level that it's grown. But mentally wise, when I'm at the company, right, I like to get really deep with these guys and really have an understanding of what's going on, how they grew up, what's these obstacles, what drives them, what's their why, right? So it's really cool that these guys that just meet me that day or that week, right, they really break down and they really, we get in these deep conversations about their life and like how they are today from the way they grew up. And it's just crazy. And I absolutely love hearing the stories and helping people grow to the next level and getting those emails saying, dude, you doubled my income. I paid off
Yeah.
all my debt. It's like, I love it. And you know that too,
Yeah.
helping business owners and helping their employees.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. The irony too of the people that work here, some of these employees worked for big agencies that did work for
Hmm.
corporations and large pharmaceuticals and things like that. And they all felt like none of their work made a difference. Right. So they came here because
Yeah.
they know that the work that we do makes a difference in people's life. Like they connect with our clients, and they become friends with these people, and you see the impact of their work. And I think that that's 25 years later, like that's what I still get energized about. That's what's exciting to me is helping to really build a better life for these companies in the work that we do.
Oh,
And it's so
absolutely.
important, and help them realize their potential for sure.
Absolutely. And, I got business listeners from, business owners, dispatchers, technicians, installers, comfort advisors. Dan, what would you like for them to get out of this episode of HVAC Masters of the Hustle?
I would just say, take a hard look at how your company is perceived and ask yourself if it's really who you guys are today. And if it's not, then maybe it's time to think about the idea of having an image and having a brand that truly represents the level and the passion and the expertise that you guys bring to work every single day. And sometimes that's an uncomfortable conversation to have, but sometimes all change is uncomfortable. But I can say that anyone that's gone through the experience never arrives on the other side of it wishing that they hadn't done it. Everyone feels like it's always this really, really important, turning point in their business, and it's like an inflection point. And everyone really, I think, afterwards is so proud to wear their brand. And we
Oh,
see stuff
absolutely.
like even like when we did Victor's rebrand at Absolute, he couldn't wait to have all the old stuff gone, and he was like a maniac, like Victor. So he was
I
crazy.
think pretty much all the
Yeah.
old stuff's almost out, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So like within like a couple of weeks, like everything was getting done over. He just didn't want to have anything at all with his old brand, and he loved the new one so much. And so like you see that too, where guys were like, "Oh my god, I used to love that brand, and now I can't stand when the guys show up with an old uniform or an old
Right.
T-shirt." You know what I mean? So like they become really, really crazy, and passionate about their own brands. And I think for a lot of guys, they just don't have that passion right now for their own image and their own brand because it's so comfortable. Like they're just so used to it, or they feel that like it's such a traumatic thing to change, so they're afraid of like going through that change and what that might look like. And like I said, obviously there's cost involved and redoing trucks and things like that, but when you're all said and done, you're going to arrive in a much better space for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And for my business owners out there, I want to elaborate a little bit. When I do go on-site, trainings with companies that were rebranded by Dan and Kick Charge, the response from the homeowners, I'm asking them, what do you think about the logos and the company and this? And the response is amazing. So keep doing what you're doing, man. I know you're blowing up the market when it comes to this stuff. Everyone's talking about you in this industry. So thank you for being a guest in the hot seat. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for having me on, man.
Absolutely. Take care, brother.
All right.